The topic for my capstone presentation is a day in the life of a woman in ancient Greece, and my primary sources were Penn State University and OWL Purdue, and they told me more of every stage in a woman's life in ancient Greece and not necessarily just the day. So my key topics are legal and social status, childhood and education, marriage and domestic life, religious rules and public visibility, social interactions and labor, contrasts between Spartan women, and lifelong control. So first, their childhood and education. They had early training, so girls were taught domestic tasks like spinning, weaving, and cooking, so their education was limited and very practical for their everyday. Their marriage preparation, girls were married around age 14 and had no formal schooling. Their education included music and dance and not intellectual pursuits. And this had an impact on them because it restricted their independence and reinforced domestic roles. Their legal and social status, they had a lack of rights, so women could not vote, own property, or participate in politics, and their legal identity was under a male guardian's authority, whether that be their father or their husband. And society viewed their life through male-centered lenses, so it marginalized female experiences. On the next slide, I have marriage and domestic life. Marriage to them was a transaction that was arranged by their fathers based on economic and family alliances, and girls were often married to older men. And their marriage was aimed at producing heirs, so this is where economic and family alliances came in. Their life after marriage, they moved into their husband's home and confided to the Gaikikon, which was just a women's quarter, so it was both a physical space and a symbol of being secluded. Their class differences had a very big role, and wealthy women had slaves for domestic labor, and poorer women managed all their chores, sometimes contributing to agriculture or markets. And the biggest thing about their class differences was that it affected their workload more than their rights, so whether they had a slave or not. Next, with religious rules and public visibility, women did have participation in religious life, so the rare public roles were through religious festivals, and women were involved in rituals that were tied to fertility and domestic roles. Commercial roles included young girls participating in rites, and their conditional participation was their public involvement that was regulated and supervised by men. Social interactions and labor. So their social life was very limited to home and nearby female relatives. Their interaction confined to domestic and social obligations. Their expectations to this with lower class women included that they could work in markets, serve as midwives, or run trades. And this gave them more visibility, but their roles were still very stigmatized. In a higher class, the Hetairai were educated courtesans that participated in intellectual life and attended synopsia, and were still marginalized socially and equated with prostitutes. So they were lowest class and educated. So contrast to Spartan women had greater freedoms, were educated, owned land, and were physically trained. And this was a status linked to role as warrior mothers. However, there was still patriarchal, with an exception to general. This was an exception to general Greek norms. Lifelong control and devaluation. Women had a very lack of autonomy. Every stage of life was overseen by male guardians, and they had no legal independence. Their female infants were more likely to be abandoned due to low economic value, and their domestic authority was limited to managing household duties with no broader power, and their household control didn't equal social authority. Why this is important and my personal takeaways. This is important because women's lives were shaped by legal and social constraints centered around their domestic roles and very much patriarchal control. My personal takeaway is something that I learned about their religious and economic exceptions that offered limited visibility but some visibility within their life and social life, and that's something that I learned through this research.